Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan and today we are going to be ranking the best and the worst picks from the Seattle Kraken expansion draft. Now the NHL expansion draft has officially concluded and it's being reported with no side deals in place. This is pretty much what we will see for the Seattle Kraken, at least for now, with their opening roster. But what were the best picks for the Seattle Kraken, the worst picks as well, and what should we think as a whole about the Seattle Kraken team? Watch till the end for all of the picks and all of the rankings, and make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're daily hockey content here. 60% of the people watching are not subscribed. If you like the Kraken, if you like hockey, this is the place to be. Now, throughout this entire expansion draft process, as the picks were getting leaked, my thought process was probably the same as yours. Okay, some of these players are a little bit weird, but there has to be some side deals, right? There were no side deals, and there are not any deals to be made by Seattle until after the NHL roster freeze, so this is the Kraken roster we have to deal with. Now, before I get into the bad picks, the worst picks, because there is some bad picks here, I first want to get into some of the good, and the first great pick, I think, for the Seattle Kraken was Yanni Gourde from the Tampa Bay Lightning. This is really a slam dunk pick, and apparently there was no trade involving Tampa and Seattle, which is a bit confusing and a bit disorienting, but they ended up picking Yanni Gourde as they should have. Can be a top six center for them, great grinding, forward-checking game, and he's a guy that can bring some big leadership, obviously back-to-back Stanley Cups, and was a big part of those back-to-back Stanley Cups for the Tampa Bay Lightning. He'll be a great player, I think, for the Seattle Kraken, and as of right now, is probably their first line center. And even though he probably will be injured for the start of the season, he's really their only great center option. And that is a little bit scary, I think, for the Seattle Kraken, especially with him starting out to be injured. But I think Yanni Gourde is a great pick, and I think will be a great player in Seattle once he fully gets into that lineup. But you know what? I'm a little bit bored right now of actual good picks, so let's move on to the worst picks the Seattle Kraken made in this expansion draft. We're going to go best and then worst and best and then worst and so on and so forth. But the first bad pick, I think, by the Seattle Kraken, and again, this is assuming there's no side deals, which there are not, and my full thought process when this player was leaked to be the pick, I thought there had to be a side deal. There had to be maybe this team actually giving a pick to Seattle for Seattle to take this player because he's probably at the very best, the third best option the Seattle Kraken had. And in my opinion, him just being picked straight up is just confusing to say the least. Enough of the suspense. The worst pick, and one of the worst picks I think by the Seattle Kraken in this expansion draft, was Morgan Geekie from the Carolina Hurricanes. Now I want to say this right up here real quick because Morgan Geekie is one of the younger players in this draft. I think has potential as a middle six player and will likely cap out as a third line guy. I don't think he's a bad player whatsoever and would be pretty decent in Carolina. But you had the opportunity of Jake Bean and Nino Niederreiter. Now, I get first Seattle and they don't want to spend too much cap. That's all fine and dandy. Why didn't you pick Jake Bean, who I am willing to bet has way more potential than Morgan Geekie? And I like Morgan Geekie, but Jake Bean is a former top 15 pick. This is a guy that has a pedigree, has actual value on the markets, and it's reported that Salem might be going after Jack Eichel, but Jake Bean would have been a much more valuable asset, and I think Buffalo would much rather have Jake Bean personally. Even in that instance where Seattle wants to have cap space, which they obviously do, Jake Bean is, in my opinion, the clear better choice. And for me personally, even though we will get into some more bad picks later on, this to me might be the worst unless there's some big galaxy brain idea that Ron Francis has where he's able to get Jack Eichel for Morgan Geekie. I doubt it at this point, and I doubt the Seattle Kraken have made the right decision here. But if Morgan Geekie's going to score 40 goals like William Karlsson, then by all means, go right ahead. Now we're going to move on to the next pick, though, this time coming from the best category. And the next best pick, I think, for the Seattle Kraken, a really, really solid pick for them personally. I'm actually going to go with defenseman Adam Larsson. Now, this was always a risk. Ending up taking a UFA, that always provides its risks. But with Seattle, in that talking period, they were able to talk with Adam Larsson and get a deal signed. $4 million for 4 seasons. And I really like this deal for Adam Larsson. I really like this deal for the Seattle Kraken as well, because Adam Larsson had a supremely good defensive year last year for the Oilers, was their best defenseman, for the most part, consistently. And I think Adam Larsson provides some really serious good potential for Seattle. Will probably be on that top pair of Mark Giordano and could be a really good shutdown D for the next few seasons. But now we're going to go straight back to the bad picks for the Seattle Kraken. And for my next bad pick for them, this is, again, another situation like Morgan Geekie, where I just don't get why you picked him for free. For anything. You didn't even get a pick back to not select another player. Nothing. Just straight up this player. And without any more suspense, again, My next pick, my next bad pick for Seattle is Curtis McDermott. There is no reason why the Seattle Kraken should pick McDermott over a Cale Clegg or a Carl Grundstrom. There's just simply not. Or a Blake Lizotte who provides some good value at such a young age as a centerman. There is simply no argument for McDermott being the pick here. He is bad at a lot of different things. He's great in fighting, good physical play, and a good shot. Besides that, the guy cannot play in the NHL. He is way a lot older as well than other defensemen. I think he's 27. He's already a guy that should have maxed his potential. He's in his prime, and he's not even good in the NHL. Meanwhile, you could have had Kyle Clegg, who could have been a future power play guy. He's 23 years old. You could have had Carl Grundstrom, who I don't even love, but at least he's a better option. You took McDermott without even finagling anything. I think you could have gotten a pick and said, hey, Seattle, we're going to take or it's LA, we're going to take Cale Clegg, but hey, give us a third round pick to not take him. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. It could have so easily happened. And I think Ron Francis's prices were just out of LA's hands, and LA didn't want to do it. And Seattle ended up picking Curtis McDermott. I just don't get it. And with so many good veteran defensive options, just thinking about it, they went after Mason Appleton. They went after Mason Appleton. They rejected Dylan DeMello and instead went with Curtis McDermott. I cannot stand that decision by Seattle. But you know what? We're going to continue the polar opposites here and go on to the next pick, this time in the good for the Seattle Kraken. And this one I think could have a really good potential to actually work out well in Seattle's favor. This time going next up to my next good pick by them in Chris Driedger. Now, Chris Driedger was a UFA as well on top of Adam Larsson. Two UFAs that had potential to actually not re-sign there. But Chris Driedger, it seemed like already had a deal way before this expansion draft, and they get it done here today. He'll be a Seattle Kraken and will likely be the starter unless any other trades end up happening. And I think that's a decent bet. I would rather have him have somebody better than Vanacek, I guess, as the backup. But Chris Driedger has been really, really good in a short sample size with Florida. And if he transitions some of that, at least like 80% of that, onto the Seattle Kraken, he'll be a pretty good starter. But I'm just hoping this is not Scott Darling. I don't think it will be, because I think Chris Driedger just has some more translatable abilities as a starter. I think he can handle that workload. But it will be a big test for Chris Driedger. In the end, though, it is a 3-year deal. It is not the biggest risk in the world. And he's a goaltender that has a great pedigree. And I think as a leader, as an older player, can teach a lot of those younger players like Dougie as well from the Ottawa Senators going to Seattle. I think it's a pretty good pick overall, and especially as a UFA to get him at 3.5, not the worst deal in the world for Seattle. But you know what? It's time to get mad again. It's time to get mad again, shall we? Going on to the next pick here, and the next worst pick by the Seattle Kraken. This is another one where I'm just confused as to what the thought process is here. The Philadelphia Flyers lost Carsen Twarynski, and I don't think they're batting any, or I don't think they're shedding any tears at this point. I know it might be crazy, I know it might be out of this world, but I don't think they'll miss him too much. This guy has played like 10 total NHL games. He's 23. What are you doing, Seattle? You have $30 million in cap space, right? $30 million in cap space. And even if you sign a ton of big guys in free agency, you're still going to have probably some cap space to work with. Not going after James Van Riemsdyk, or not even like just getting a pick, like getting a first-round pick and taking Jacob Voracek from the Flyers, could have done a trade like that and made it work. Instead of doing that, you take a guy who's barely playing the NHL, hasn't been good in the games he's played, and is 23. This guy is not going to be it. He's a fourth liner at best. And you picked one. You went over James Van Riemsdyk, one of the best power play players in the league. Could have been your James Neal. And you pick Carsen Twarynski. All I have to say is good luck. But you know what? We're going to go to another good pick here by Seattle. And once again, it comes here on the defense. Another UFA. I mean, a lot of their UFA picks have actually done pretty well for them. Now going on to Jamie Oleksiak, formerly of the Dallas Stars. Now his contract is a risk. 5 years at 4.6. I think the dollar amount is fine, but the term is a little bit too much for me. Still in the end, Jamie Oleksiak is one of the more underrated defensive defensemen in the entire league. Has good skating on his skates, and I think physically can also provide just so much value there. And personally, I think it's a pretty good pick for the Seattle Kraken. Instead of getting like a random AHLer that Dallas had available, they didn't really have too many guys available for the Seattle Kraken. Instead of getting one one of those guys. They get a UFA, but they get a top 4 defenseman that can provide some great physical, great defensive play, and to me, that's an absolute win. Definitely one of their best picks, one of the best players already on that current roster. Now, again, that contract is a risk, but on top of Adam Larsson, on top of Carsen, they have a pretty strong core of defensive defensemen. I think that is definitely going to be key for Seattle. If Seattle, right now, as it currently is, roster-wise, if they're going to have success, it's going to be from that defense, and Jamie Oleksiak will be a huge part of that defense going forward. Obviously, for the next 5 years, I think he'll be a mainstay on that D-core and will be a top 4 defenseman, I think, caliber-wise, at least, for a very long time. But it's exactly, I think, Seattle needs, and mentoring some of those young defensemen as well, not the worst thing in the world either. But you know what? We're going to continue these stars lineage and go on to a terrible pick here by the Dallas Stars, by the Seattle Kraken. And next up, I have to go to one that was confusing to a lot of people, and even as a Stars fan, I simply don't get it. Even though he is a former Star, I just don't see what Seattle is doing here. We're now going to go to one of the worst picks of the Seattle Kraken expansion draft and go on to the Columbus pick, Gavin Bayreuther. Gavin Bayreuther is not a guy you want at the NHL level, and he's 27, he's a UFA, didn't really play for Columbus, didn't really do anything. And I get the risk in Max Domi, I do. But instead of going a low risk, good bottom sixer in Kevin Stenlund, they go for a guy who is, if he even plays in the NHL, will be just a mistake for Seattle, just a mistake. Clearing the air right there. It'll be a bad situation. You could have had a reliable middle six or bottom six center in Kevin Stenlund who can win faceoffs, who's looked pretty decent so far, and they got a lot of points in his small sample size last year. You could have gotten that. Instead, you go for a more Asian defenseman who hasn't proved himself at all in the NHL level. And to me, again, and there's another pick that I just do not get from Seattle, especially with no side trade involved. They didn't even have to, Columbus didn't even have to give up anything. They keep Domi, they keep Kevin Stenlund, and as another team on top of a lot of teams right now that is loving what Seattle ended up picking. This is a perfect situation for Columbus. They don't need Bayreuther. They're completely fine. They can get an extra defenseman in free agency easy. And instead, they keep Domi, they keep Stenlund, and are pretty well off. But you know what? We're going to go right back to the very good picks here by the Seattle Kraken. And this is a pick that I think is very important for Seattle this upcoming season. And is one of the few guys I think that can actually score goals for this team. We're going to go on to their pick from the Nashville Predators and Calle Janrkok. Now, Calle Janrkok, I think, is one of the most underrated wingers in the entire league. And I think for Seattle, it is a good idea to take his contract, take that type of player instead of a Duchesne, instead of a Ryan Johansson. That, I think, is a good idea. But again, it's kind of a bad and a good thing as well, because I personally really like the Calle Janrkok deal and like that pick. But at the same time, I would preface that by saying, yes, he's a good, valuable player. What are you going to do around him? Right now, unless he's on the first line of Yanni Gourde, even then he's injured for the first month of the season, who is he going to be centered by? It's McCann, and he's not even a true center either. So at this point, even though I like that pick a lot, it still kind of confuses me in terms of the overall makeup of the team with Janrkok's fit. But I do think on paper, Janrkok is a super good player and will fit perfectly, I think, in Seattle if he's given a center to work with. And next up, we're going to go to a couple more worst picks before we go on to the last best pick here in this video. But the next worst pick, I think, for the Seattle Kraken, this was another confusing one because they already have so many solid young defensemen. Yet they go for another one for practically no reason. We're now going to go to the Seattle Kraken's pick from the Detroit Red Wings in Dennis Cholowski. Now, I think Dennis Cholowski still has potential in the NHL. As an offensive D-man, there is talent there. But you skip on Troy Stecher, who would have been your clear number 6 option. And unless Seattle's willing to sign a guy like Dougie Hamilton or something, and it doesn't even seem that likely at this point, nobody's going to be able to fill that 6th spot if this current roster stands. Troy Stecher, though, would have been a perfect fit as that 6th defenseman, was great for Detroit in a huge role there and was thrown to the Wolves, still did very well. He was the best choice for the Seattle Kraken. It was amazing how Detroit exposed him and still kept him. And I still can't believe it. I still can't believe it. That was another situation where I was like, okay, maybe Detroit gives something for Seattle to take on Cholowski. Maybe they keep Troy Stecher that way. No, they just keep Troy Stecher, and Steve Yzerman, once again, is making some genius moves. And you know what? I've been pretty negative throughout this video for sure, but I did want to end it on one good note here, and a good pick, I think, by the Seattle Kraken. We're now going to go to a guy that I was kind of interested to see if he would actually be picked in Joey Daccord from the Ottawa Senators. Now, it was reported that Seattle might have gone for a Dadonov or a Chris Tierney, and and I'm really glad they did not, though they could use a guy like Dadonov now thinking about it on that roster. But I really enjoy the story of Driedger. He's a guy that was coming up for the Ottawa Center system these past few seasons, got some good games played in. This last year got a season-ending injury, though, which just sucked the life out of his season. But this is a guy that still has major potential as a decent NHL guy, and I think even at 24 years old, there's a lot that still can be unlocked. I'm really happy, though, for Driedger going to Seattle. He could get a pretty decent opportunity there as a third goalie, perhaps, and maybe could get some good games in, but I think he's a guy that has potential in Seattle and could maybe be their future starter if things don't exactly go as planned. But honestly, out of most of the Seattle picks, I think Driedger is one of those guys I'm definitely rooting for to have a great season, and I'm hoping he does. But that'll be pretty much it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below what you agree and disagree with my picks. What do you think were the best picks by the Seattle Kraken? What do you think were the worst picks by the Seattle Kraken? And let me know how you guys think the Seattle Kraken will look in year one. Do you see this roster continuing? How well you see them doing in their first season? Spoiler alert, I don't see them doing too well, so there you go. But let me know all your thoughts. Make sure you share this video with your friends. Subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell if you haven't already. And click on the Discord for all my Seattle Kraken expansion content right on one playlist. My name is Nathan. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video or stream. Goodbye.